Hello there, everyone. Welcome to my Hunter x Hunter Nin Impact roster predictions video. This is actually a video I have been wanting to make ever since it was announced at Jump Fest that Hunter x Hunter would be getting a, quote, full-scale fighting game. We still don't really know what they mean by the term full-scale. The publisher is a company I had never heard of before in Bushiroad Games. So I looked them up, and apparently they typically only do mobile games. So maybe they said full scale only to mean that it would be a console game rather than a mobile game. If mobile games is what people typically expect from them, maybe that's why they would want to say it so as not to have the wrong expectations. But maybe more optimistically, you could interpret full scale to mean that it is going to be an actual legit fighting game with some staying power as opposed to some generic anime arena fighter, right? As is usually the case with anime fighting games. Typically, whenever an anime fighting game gets announced, it's going to mean that it's going to be some generic arena fighter without much staying power, as is happening currently with Jujutsu Kaisen, for example, right? But more excitingly is the fact that Aiding is going to be the developer. So if you want to be a little optimistic about it and assume the latter, assume that it is going to be an actual legit fighting game, the fact that the developer is Aiding corroborates that a little bit, because Aiding has been the developer behind games such as Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. And since the announcement that Hunter x Hunter would be getting this fighting game, we have actually gotten a trailer. Well, it's kind of a stretch to call it a trailer. It's more of a teaser. It's like a 30-second teaser. It doesn't really show gameplay or anything, but it does essentially confirm at least one thing, and that is the fact that it's going to be a 3v3 fighting game, or at least it's obvious that was the intent behind the video, to show off that it was going to be a 3v3 team-based fighting game, which Aiding is no stranger to, obviously. Like I said, they made Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, both of which are 3v3 tag team fighting games. So I think it is safe to assume it is going to play at least somewhat like those two games, which is going to be amazing and a lot better than a generic arena fighter. If you want to read into the teaser a little bit more, though, if you look at the environment is sort of radially symmetric. It's sort of an octagon, and that could just be because it's obviously based on an environment in the source material, so maybe they just wanted to copy it to a T, and they didn't want to deviate from it at all. But I think that with the stage being octagonal and it being viewable from any angle, with it being viewable from essentially 8 different directions, that makes me think there's at least a chance that it'll be a 3D fighting game, which might dissuade some people from getting excited, because if it's a 3D fighting game, that'll make it less like Tatsunoko vs. Capcom or Marvel vs. Capcom. But I actually like 3D fighting games. A lot of people that only play 2D fighting games, sometimes I think they conflate 3D fighting games with arena fighters, but a 3D fighting game does not equate to an arena fighter at all. In fact, I would still consider my favorite fighting game to be Soul Calibur 6, and that is a 3D fighting game. And I would actually be kind of excited if it's a 3D fighting game, because if it's a 3v3 tag team assist-based fighting game, but it's also 3D, that is something we have never seen before. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys can let me know if I'm overlooking a game, but typically tag team-based fighting games are 2D, and 3D fighting games are 1v1. Obviously, there's Tekken Tag Tournament, but that's not 3v3. And if this game has assists, that'll be different than Tekken Tag Tournament as well. The one downside, I think, though, if it is going to be a 3D fighting game, is that just based on the precedent that is set in the market right now, as of recording this video, 3D fighting games typically have worse netcode than 2D fighting games. And so if this game does end up being 3D, I think that'll decrease the chances of the game having good netcode, which will suck, obviously. Or honestly, the netcode is my biggest concern about this game. I think the gameplay design will be good with Aiding being the developer behind it. So that leaves my biggest concern to be the netcode. If it were being published by Bandai Namco, I would have no hopes for the netcode. But with it being this company I've never heard of before, and with this being the company's first foray into fighting games, it's kind of a 50-50, I think, if they are going to try to give it good netcode or not. But anyway, obviously, I am going to be basing the likelihood of characters getting in on their popularity in tandem with their viability for a moveset. And so I will be talking about what these characters do in the show. So that is the obvious spoiler warning for the show, at least. I'm only going to be talking about events in the show. Firstly, because I expect that is purely what the game is going to be based on. I think it's only going to be based on events in the show. And also, I have only seen the show. I would have made this video way earlier. Like I said, I've been wanting to make this video ever since it was announced. So you might be wondering, why didn't I just make the video immediately? It's because I had actually not seen Hunter x Hunter at all when this announcement was first made. But coincidentally, I was actually planning on watching it sometime soon. At the time, my brother had recently finished watching the show and he kept urging me to watch it. And so I was going to watch it. And coincidentally, it got announced that it was going to have a fighting game. So if I wasn't already looking forward to watching it, that automatically made me want to watch it more, because I was obviously automatically excited for a new fighting game by Aiding. And so I wanted to watch the show with some intent of studying what each character does, with the intent to theorize a move set for each character whenever I saw characters doing stuff. And multiple times throughout watching the show, I wanted to just pause the show and start making this video, but I had to exercise some self-control and wait until I finished watching all the episodes, so that way I would have the entire source material, at least in terms of the show, to work with in terms of conceptualizing move sets here. I do think I kind of want to read the rest of the manga, though. But as of right now, I am just going to be basing these character likelihoods on events that transpire in the show. So that was your obvious spoiler warning. Also, I think this game, or this IP in particular, is very fun to conceptualize movesets for, because if it were a more typical shonen game, I think it would be way easier to conceptualize movesets. And some of these characters, it's really easy to conceptualize movesets for. But other characters, not so much, because a lot of characters in the show, they only partially show off what their ability is, and sometimes they don't even explain how it worked exactly. You kind of just have to assume how it worked. The power system in this show is so well made that they can just show characters do things, and the audience can explain it themselves. The audience can come up with an explanation based on how the power system works. So I think that, I think Togashi, I think the mangaka that created this, is just so confident in his power system that he doesn't feel the need to explain how a lot of these things work. Because like I said, if you know how the power system works, you can kind of reverse engineer anything that happens in this show. But there are going to be multiple different interpretations of how you should reverse engineer an explanation of how something works, right? So I don't know if they could, or if Togashi would even be willing to do this, but there's a chance that maybe for some characters, you would have to ask Togashi to spill the beans on what the full extent of their ability is, because some characters never even show off their ability in the show. And so it would be cool if they could get Togashi to fully explain how some of these abilities work, even if it's going to spoil the manga a little bit, because even in the manga, some characters don't have their abilities fully shown off. But I'm just going to go under the assumption that they're not going to get any extra information, and I'm just going to try to theorize or conceptualize a roster based on what we do know and what's possible. So let me explain the tiers a little bit here. Obviously, you're looking at the confirmed characters already. These were the characters that were shown in the 30-second teaser I was mentioning before. With Gon, Killua, Kurapika, Leorio, Hisoka, and Netero. Some of these I would have automatically assumed to be in, even if they didn't announce them, right? So Gon, Killua, and Kurapika, those were the obvious ones. Oh, and Hisoka. So these four were obvious. I would have put these in a pretty much confirmed category. even if they hadn't confirmed them. Obviously, Gon being the main character, he's going to have to be in. But also, his moveset would be really interesting for a main character, right? And again, spoilers about the show. His Nin ability, well, I don't even know if you would consider it a Nin ability, but his transformation would be some kind of install super, right? But he's using up all of his Nin. He's using up all of his aura when he does it, or at least when he did it that one time in the show. And so I think it would be really cool if he actually died after using it, which would mean that it wouldn't be entirely useless, right? But that would allow it to still be accurate to the source material, but still be good, because it would mean, okay, so for people that haven't played 3v3 fighting games before, those games can be very volatile, okay? And you really want to snowball when you're winning. You really want to press your advantage to keep things in your favor. So if Gon had an install super that was kind of OP but balanced with the fact that he dies at the end of the round, well, it wouldn't even be round-based. Let's say he'll either die, from the opponent beating him, or he dies when he beats his opponent that's in. Or maybe there's a time limit. That actually would probably make more sense, it being a timed install that would kill Gon when the time runs out. That would be something you would want to use if you have more characters alive than the opponent, for example. Let's say you have Gon and another character, or Gon and two characters still alive on your team, but the opponent has one character left, and you just want to wrap it up, right? You could activate the Gon install, and that would be an entirely viable place to use it without it just being a gimmick. Or maybe it's so OP, and you want to try to pull a comeback, so you pop the install, but then you have a limited amount of time to do it, right? Basically an X Factor, but only one character gets an X Factor. I think that's actually a pretty good way to put it. Yeah, Gon could be the X Factor character. Obviously, X Factor is a very hated mechanic. I don't like it either, but I think for it to just be on one specific character as an install, that would be pretty cool. Also, there was a character, this isn't really a general gameplay design philosophy, but just something that I want to throw in there, is that there's a character in BlazBlue named Platinum, and her jab is a rock, paper, scissor, and it's just a visual thing normally. So normally when you pick her, even though there's a 1 in 3 chance of every rock, paper, scissor option with her hand, whenever she throws her hand out for a jab, if you play a mirror match and you try to contest jabs, the rock, paper, scissor option that beats the other one, or the winning rock, paper, scissor option, will actually give priority to that jab over the other one. So I think that would be a really funny thing to add in with Gon if you're playing in a mirror. Even though that's not really important, I just thought, I was trying to think of other rock, paper, scissors things in fighting games, and that was literally an instance of somebody throwing rock, paper, scissors. It's funny though, because there are so many times throughout the show of Hunter x Hunter in which I was thinking, man, I don't know if Togashi actually plays fighting games or not, but he talks a lot about mind games and risk assessment that goes into fighting games, like RPS mechanics and trying to call your opponent's bluffs and all of that. So the whole time I was thinking, man, it kind of makes perfect sense that this franchise would get a fighting game, and I'm surprised it took this long. But then at the end of watching it, I realized maybe the reason why it hasn't gotten one yet is because it's kind of hard to come up with a moveset for some of the characters. But Aiding has done some weird movesets before, so I know they are up for the task. And then Killua. Killua, it's probably the easiest character to make a moveset for in this entire lineup of characters from the show. Either Killua and Kurapika. Both of these characters have insane potential for movesets. Killua could have a Godspeed install. Also, he could use the yo-yos, and it would kind of be similar to a fighting game character that Aiding has done in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom in Yatterman. Yatterman had a kendama, and if you don't know what a kendama is, it's a Japanese skill toy, as they call them. It has a wooden ball on a string, and you're supposed to catch it in a cup or a spike. And he swings that around as a weapon in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. So I was thinking Killua with the yo-yos could be kind of similar to that. there's so many cases where a conceptualized moveset would be kind of similar to something Aiding has done before. Maybe he could use the skateboard. I don't know if he would ever really use that as a move. He would at least have the skateboard as an intro cinematic, right? When the match is starting and your teammates are walking in. You could use the skateboard at least to roll up on the match. Kurapika, like I said, Killua and Kurapika are both the... they would probably have the most loaded movesets. Kurapika has the most loaded moveset. I'm not talking about fighting game moveset. I'm just talking about in-universe. Kurapika has probably the most loaded moveset in any anime, of any anime character ever. There were multiple times throughout the show in which I had to pause and rewind a few seconds to hear an explanation again, just to make sure I was understanding it correctly. And even afterwards, I looked it up online, and he still has 2 extra things. He has 2 extra abilities that I'm not going to say what they are because, like I said, I'm only going to spoil anime stuff here. But he still has more stuff he can do that isn't revealed until parts that are only in the manga right now. So in the anime, he doesn't even show off everything he can do. And even if it were just the anime, there's so much stuff he can do, and how his abilities interact with each other. Honestly, looking into how Kurapika's moveset works, it feels as if you're building a character in an RPG and you're trying to figure out how damage multipliers affect other things. Like, how can you min-max the most damage, and you're trying to figure out ways to get the damage multipliers optimized, right? But in general, I think he would play kind of like Ghost Rider, which is something Aiding has done in Marvel vs. Capcom, hence why I say Ghost Rider with the chains, right? As being a sort of unconventional zoner with the chain attacks. Also, I was thinking maybe a little bit like old Joseph, or Part 3 Joseph from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R, with the Hermit Purple whip attacks. Like I said, he would be kind of an unconventional zoner. But I think the biggest question when it comes to Kurapika is how accurate to source material would they want to make this game, right? They could make this game incredibly accurate to source material, and it would be kind of a fan servicey game in that sense, because I'm specifically thinking of Chain Jail, right? Chain Jail is something that should only work, well, I'll get to that. There's an asterisk by that. Something that should only work on the Phantom Troop members, right? And so if you want to make it as accurate to source material as possible, would he only be able to use Chain Jail on Phantom Troop members and have it be super OP against them? I guess you could try to balance a fighting game that way, because with it being a team game, maybe you would want to just never play a team of 3 Phantom Troop members, because then you can get rock, paper, scissored by the check, right? Like, if you're fighting somebody with Kurapika and you have 3 Phantom Troop members, then you're essentially just playing a paper into a scissors, right? So maybe you could balance it that way if there was somebody else that were just really good against Kurapika, and so you could just play them on your team if you have a Phantom Troop member. But I was thinking, I actually don't think it would be that bad. Well, first of all, I actually think that Chain Jail could sort of be like Gon's install, in that, if I remember correctly, he never said that he couldn't use Chain Jail on a non-Phantom Troop member. He only set the condition that he would die if he used it on a non-Phantom Troop member, which means he could theoretically use it on a non-Phantom Troop member and it would work, and then he would die right afterwards. So I guess it would, in one sense, you could make it like a command grab, right? I was trying to think, would he be a command grab character? Because old Joseph in JoJo's All-Star Battle R, he has a command grab. He has a command grab with a pretty big range. And I was expecting Chain Jail to maybe be like that if it were a regular command grab. But it would be weird if he had a command grab that only worked on certain characters, or would kill him if he did it on other characters, right? So I was thinking it would probably have to be a super, especially because Chain Jail is such an epic part of the show. I think it would merit being a super instead of a regular command grab, right? And plus, if he's kind of a zoner, it might be kind of OP if he's a zoner with a command grab, even though it's not OP in All-Star Battle R. I'm just trying to think of how Aiding would do it, right? So it could be a super, and it could work on anybody, just it would kill him. I was saying it would be similar to Gon's install in the sense that it's kind of a reckless double-edged sword. So let's say you really wanted to finish an opponent off and you're doing a combo and you combo into it, or maybe you're able to like whiff punish something with the command grab super. Maybe you think it's worth letting Kurapika die to finish off that opponent, especially if you are in the situation that I was speculating earlier. If you have more characters alive than your opponent, let's say your opponent has just one character left and you can kill them with Kurapika's Chain Jail, it's fine if Kurapika dies, because then if you both lose your characters that are on screen, you'll still be left with backup characters, right? And you would automatically win. But even then, some people might think that's kind of, too fan servicey, not balanced. It's just too gimmicky. It would make the game not taken seriously. If you are going to make Chain Jail a super like that, I think, let's say every character gets 3 supers in this game, right? Like a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, something like that. However they do it. Let's just say, for example, every character in the game gets 3 supers. Kurapika could just have an additional super with Chain Jail, right? So then in most matchups, in non-Phantom Troop matchups, it's not as if he's missing a super. He would still have 3 normal supers, but let's just say he has a command grab super that he doesn't really use often except in Phantom Troop matchups. I think that would be the perfect way to do it, because then it's lore accurate, but it's also not going to make him just a bad character versus non-Phantom Troop members, right? Because if he were locked out of, if he only had 3 supers and if he were locked out of one of them in a lot of cases against non-Phantom Troop members, then that would kind of make him bad in a lot of matchups. But just give him a 4th super. That could be his thing, right? He gets an additional super, which is Chain Jail, which is an OP command grab, but it kills him if he uses it on anyone but Phantom Troop members. Speaking of JoJo's All-Star Battle R, I was also thinking there's something similar in that game when it comes to the vampire characters. The vampire characters in that game actually take more damage from Hamon moves. The Hamon users in JoJo's All-Star Battle R essentially get access to EX moves from Street Fighter. If you turn a move into an EX move, you are imbuing the move with Hamon. And in that game, vampires just take more damage from Hamon attacks. So I was thinking maybe they could do the middle ground and just have Chain Jail do less damage or something on non-Phantom Troop members, but I think that's too much of a half measure, because I think it should just work like normal on everybody, or do what I just said and have it kill him on non-Phantom Troop members, but just make it an additional super. Because it doing less damage on non-Phantom Troop members, it would be acknowledging the fact that it shouldn't work, but at the same time, it would be not killing him. So I think it would be weird to acknowledge it, but not kill him. I think it should go all the way, or just have it work on everyone, right? But preferably, like I said, I would want it to be an extra super. Okay, I knew talking about Kurapika would take a long time. Like I said, even after watching the show and reading parts of the subtitles and comparing different translations to see how they explained things, I had to look it up, and I saw that there were a ton of arguments online of people debating how exactly his abilities work. So, needless to say, Kurapika could easily be one of the coolest fighting game characters ever with his insane moveset potential. And I'm going to talk about Hisoka, despite Leorio being next in the order I have here, because like I said, Killua, Gon, Killua, Kurapika, and Hisoka, I think were the 4 most obvious characters to be added. And the reason why Hisoka is more obvious than Leorio, in my opinion, is because Jump Force exists. And that game did not have Leorio. It had multiple characters included over Leorio. And I think that's just because Hisoka, for example, it's a lot easier to make a moveset for him over Leorio, namely because of Bungee Gum. Bungee Gum has a crazy moveset potential, right? He even says in the show that the reason he doesn't mind telling his opponents what his ability is because he doesn't see that as giving him much of a disadvantage if they know how it works, because it has an infinite amount of uses. It has an infinite amount of ways in which you can apply it into a fight without the opponent seeing it coming. Specifically, though, I was thinking, okay, would Bungee Gum command grab somebody? Like maybe you could do hit grabs with it or something. But what I specifically thought of was the tether that they gave Baiken in Guilty Gear Strive. Imagine if a certain move, imagine if you could combo into a certain move that would leave Bungee Gum stuck to the opponent, and then when they woke up after getting knocked down, they had this Bungee Gum tether, and it would pull the opponent in during other combos, and it would open up routes for Bungee Gum specific combos, similar to the tether in Guilty Gear Strive. I think that would be a really cool mechanic to copy for the Bungee Gum to make it unique instead of it just being like a generic hit grab or something. So now talking about Leorio, yeah, I really don't know how to conceptualize a moveset for him, considering he only used a Nin attack once in the entire show when he punched Jing. And, okay, let's say you were to just copy that move and put that move in the game. You don't really know exactly how it worked, because he punched this lectern thing. He had the mic on a lectern, and he punched it and it broke, and then he essentially emitted. They said he was an emitter, which would mean that he's emitting his aura and emitting it as a fist, even though it kind of looked as if he made a portal and sent his fist through the portal to do a portal like teleport punch. But they said he was an emitter, so I'm going to take their word for it, even though Killua was the one I think that assumed he was an emitter based on the footage he was watching. But anyway, just in that one scene, you don't know if there were any conditions, right? You don't know if he had to punch downwards on a physical object in order for it to get teleported. You don't know if he had to actually physically break something as a condition to make his punch get teleported, right? It could be any of those. And I think aiding is just going to have to kind of make an assumption. But just that one move is not enough to create an entire moveset, right? Maybe you could create an entire moveset of teleport punches, but I think that would be a little overly presumptuous, considering if you try to predict what a character's entire moveset is, right? Like, let's say you were to only look at a single move of any character in the whole show and then try to assume what the rest of their moveset is. There's a very low chance you are going to get it entirely accurate. So if aiding tries to come up with an entire moveset of teleport punches, I don't think it'll be accurate to whatever Leorio's Nin ability ends up being in the manga. So I think what they're actually going to do is obviously keep the teleport punch, like maybe have him punch the ground and have the punch come up, right? Let that be one of his main special attacks. But with this being aiding, and with Leorio kind of being a non-combat character for the majority of the show, I think they might actually do a Phinx Wright treatment on him and have a bunch of animations and references to source material be attacks that weren't necessarily attacks in the show. So for example, they could have him yelling at a phone, right? They could have him screaming at a phone, and that could have a hitbox, similar to how they made Phinx Wright attack with things that weren't actually explicitly an attack, such as hitting papers, right? Hitting papers, throwing papers, things like that. So I think Leorio is going to be sort of not a joke character, but kind of an unconventional character in that sense. So I guess considering that, it does make sense that they would put Leorio in. You know, they really wanted to, because he is one of the main four. It's just kind of weird that Jump Force skipped him, and I thought that was going to set a precedent. But no, aiding is going to do it, and like I said, I think it's because aiding is just completely up to the task, considering they have done some weird movesets for characters before, such as Phinx Wright. And Netero is probably the most surprising character out of the 6 confirmed so far, but I particularly am very glad that he has been announced this early, because he's my favorite character from the show, and controlling the 100 type Guan Yin statue would be probably one of the coolest things I can think of in any fighting game. But the question really comes down to how would they implement it, right? So on one hand, they could have the hands come in from off screen, and it would behave maybe similar to the Zord attacks from Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, right? You could have all the hands come in from off screen like that. Or maybe when you're playing as Netero and you call in the statue, the camera could zoom out and it would be like the giant battles from Tatsunoko versus Capcom. It could be like Gold Lighton, for example. That would be pretty funny, and you could see the entire statue the entire time. They could go multiple ways with that. I'm really excited to see how you adapt the 100 type Guan Yin into a fighting game. But even in the I said this in general, but this is another one of the specific cases where it sounded as if Togashi had played fighting games before. Because during the Meruem versus Netero fight, and Meruem was trying to figure out how to get in, and he was trying to study his opponent's moves, Meruem very quickly came to the realization that Netero had a finite amount of attack vectors with the limbs of the 100 type Guanyin. And that sounds just like a fighting game, right? Because in a fighting game, you have programmed moves that will always be the same. It's not as if you can just throw the same punch but slightly differently, or just have any kind of natural inconsistency in attacks, right? Meruem was talking about the 100 type Guanyin as if it had a limited move set, and it had a finite amount of attack vectors, and Meruem was trying to figure out how much screen space essentially was covered by these attack vectors at different ranges, and he was trying to thread the needle, so to speak, to get in. And so it already sounded as if 100 type Guanyin was a fighting game character, which is why I'm really glad that it's going to get in. Like I said, he's my favorite character, so I hope I really like his gameplay as well. I think clapping people with the 100 type Guanyin would be so much fun. But I wonder if that would be a command grab. I'm specifically talking about it appearing behind Meruem. When Netero had it appear behind Meruem and it caught Meruem and shot the beam, that would probably be a super, right? And if it is going to be a super, then maybe you could have a ranged command grab like that. I know ranged command grab sounds insane, but JP in Street Fighter is allowed to have a ranged command grab, and his zoning is insane. And aiding games are typically more insane than Street Fighter. So he could definitely have a ranged command grab like that. It would probably be reactable, right? You could have it be balanced by just having it play an animation when you activate it, and then if the opponent isn't doing anything, they can just react and jump. So maybe it would be more like a full screen whiff punish or something like that, right? You could punish zoning with it. I think that would be really cool. As for the rest of the attacks, they would probably just be giant hitboxes, whether it's coming in from off screen like the Zords from Power Rangers, or if it's like the Giants from Tatsunoko versus Capcom. But I really hope I like his gameplay, like I said, because he's my favorite character in the show. Okay, so I've finished talking about the confirmed characters, and I have been recording for 30 minutes already. Okay, I thought this whole video was only going to be like 20 or 30 minutes, but it's become very apparent that this is going to be longer than I was expecting. So I hope there are other people as into this as me. So I'm not going to speak in order of confirmed to likely to unlikely but possible to assist only. Oh, I haven't even explained the categories yet. I wanted to talk about the confirmed characters first. I'm not going to go strictly in order of these categories, because if I'm going to be looking for a specific character, I might have trouble finding them quickly, and that would make the video unnecessarily long. So I'm just going to look in order, and then when I see one, I'm going to put them in the category I think they belong to which I think they belong. But let me explain the category. So obviously confirmed was self-explanatory. Likely means I think they are extremely likely to get into the game based on their popularity and also their viability for a moveset. Unlikely but possible means I think it is possible they will be added to the game, but unlikely for one reason or another. Maybe DLC, right? When I say possible, I mean it is possible to do an actual cool moveset for them. I'm not going to put every character on the tier list. I'm only putting characters on the tier list that I think could be conceivable in some way. Like I'm not putting the pig chef in anything here, right? Because the majority of characters in this show are just obviously not worth considering. And then the assist only category, which is probably going to necessitate the most explanation. I know that this game, with this game being a 3v3 fighting game, it's extremely unlikely that this is going to have assist-only characters, but I wanted to add this just for fun, because I think there are some characters in the show that have an attack, that have at least one attack or something that would be really cool to have in a fighting game, but just can't make up a complete moveset. So think of this as an honorable mention category, right? An honorable mention category in terms of a character I think would be cool, but just doesn't have enough to make for a complete moveset. Hopefully it'll make a bit more sense once I start putting characters on here. You'll see what I'm talking about. So let's go in order. Let's see here. Anyone on this first list? This is one of Genthru's goons, which I will talk about once I get to actual Genthru. Okay, here's a character I think would be conceivable for assist only. So again, I don't think the game is actually going to have assist only characters like Marvel vs. Capcom 1 or Mortal Kombat 1. But this guy, he is able to throw out talismans, right? So imagine if the game did have assist-only characters. I think it would be cool if he were one of those assist-only characters. He could throw out a talisman, and the talisman could fall, and then once it hits the ground, it combusts into flames, right? Or whatever it touches catches on fire. I think that would create some cool Oki setups, right? So imagine you combo your opponent, and when you knock them down, you finish the combo with throwing out this, which slowly falls, and it gives you insane Oki, right? Because it would be really easy to set up that as meaty. Just throw the talisman on somebody whenever they get knocked down. So that is what I mean by assist only. I think that would be a really cool move, but I just don't know how you would create an entire move set around the talismans, especially when you don't really see it used very much in the show. Let's see. Biscuit. Biscuit, I think, is extremely likely to get in. First of all, because she was in Jump Force. She was another one of the characters that got into Jump Force over Leorio. And also, it's just way too easy to put her in a fighting game with her having that transformation. So I think that's a very easy likely. Originally, when I was thinking about how to make this video before that 30-second teaser came out, obviously, at that time, there were no confirmed characters. I was going to have a category called pretty much confirmed or all but confirmed. And if I were still doing that, I would put Biscuit in there because I think she's a no-brainer. And if they want to have at least a decent amount of female characters in the roster just to add some variety, there really aren't that many viable female character options here. So with her being one of the few viable female characters to be turned into a fighting game character, I think that is pretty much a 99% chance of getting added. Here's another assist-only character. I think Bloster would be a textbook lockdown assist, right? He would show up, fire his claw machine guns for a while, and it would force the opponent to block, and it would allow you to run up and set something up, set up a mix-up or set up a trap or something like that. That's a textbook lockdown assist. That is what I'm talking about when I mean assist only. But Bloster literally doesn't do anything else besides shoot his claws, shoot the nin bullets out of his claws. So that is why you definitely would not be able to make a full move set with him. In fact, I think he would actually be more likely than this guy for being an assist only character. So I'm going to loosely try to order these characters as I place them. But then once I'm done, by the very end, I will look at it again and try to actually settle on an order within each tier. Where was I? I do think Canary would be cool, but I think I haven't gotten to Gotoh yet. I think if any butler is going to be represented, it would be Gotoh, even though I do like Canary. She just doesn't ever really do anything unique enough to merit putting her into a game, I think. Skipping Chitu. Okay, Chrollo, that's another no-brainer. Chrollo is able to, we still don't, at least based on the anime, don't exactly know what the conditions are for him stealing a nin ability, but we do know that one way or another he is able to steal nin abilities, and so he's able to stockpile them, but he has to have a book open, and he has to have it flipped to the page of the nin ability he wants to use. So I don't think he would, maybe some people would think that he could steal the nin ability of his opponent in the game. I don't think they would do him that way because, first of all, like I said, we don't even know what the conditions are for him stealing his opponent's nin ability. So there's nothing for them to base that on. There's nothing on which for them to base that. I think I said that correctly. But also, even if you did know what the conditions were, I don't think that Chrollo ever practically tries to steal the nin ability of somebody mid-combat, because in the one fight, in his one fight in which he was against Zeno and Silva, he was trying to capture Zeno with that blanket from another nin ability he stole. He was trying to capture Zeno so that way later he could do whatever his conditions are. He could fulfill the conditions later in order to steal Zeno's nin ability, which means the conditions must be so weird he can't just do them in the middle of a fight, practically, right? So I don't think they would have him be able to steal an inability in a fight at all. I think he would just have a really giant moveset of a bunch of different attacks. And I think that's where they could use creative freedom. So if he's able to steal nin abilities, you could give him all sorts of things, and it's fine, because even if you come up with all these nin abilities that he had stolen, and they never show up in the show or the manga or anything, you could say, oh, well, he had those in the book. He just never ended up using them in the manga, right? So I think that is where there is room for creative freedom. That would be funny. Speaking of the blanket that he was trying to use to capture Zeno, imagine if he had that as a move, but it wasn't unblockable. Imagine him running around with an unblockable blanket. I could see that being a super or something, maybe. No, a blanket wouldn't be a super. I think that should be a regular attack. I think I just subconsciously said super because Funny Valentine in JoJo's All-Star Battle, he has a super in which the animation is throwing the American flag on somebody. I think I was maybe thinking of that animation as similar to what I would expect the blanket animation to be, because you never actually saw him use the blanket in the fight, but you can assume that he was just wanting to throw the blanket on somebody, because when it was used in the show prior, it was when they caught a car. So I think you just throw the blanket on someone. So that's one move that you could come up with. Also, his fish. I think his fish would maybe have to be the super. It's crazy that he gets to essentially be a composite character of all these different nin abilities, but he also has the fish. I think it would be crazy. Imagine if you could use the fish to just troll your opponent. You could use the fish to get the opponent at 0 HP, but then that character doesn't actually die until you call the fish off. But also, I just remembered this condition. The fish can only be used if they're not indoors. And the one stage that we've seen already is in Heaven's Arena, and that is very clearly indoors. So does that mean Chrollo just wouldn't be able to use the fish on certain stages? Again, that's another thing they'll have to think of that's kind of similar to Kurapika's Change Ale. How accurate to source material do they want this to be? If the game were 2D and not 3D, they could just come up with the excuse that there is a door open or something somewhere, and it's just on the side of the camera. If the game is 2D, right, it means it's going to have the same camera perspective at all times, and they could say that you are just looking at essentially a stage, and on the other side of the camera, there's a door or a window open or something. But I think that would be kind of cheesy of an excuse, and I do think there's a pretty decent likelihood it's going to be a 3D fighting game. So I don't know how they would do the fish. They could just make it only work on certain stages. In fact, they could actually kind of balance it the same way as Kurapika's Change Ale. Maybe Chrollo could have 4 supers instead of 3. Make the fish an additional super that only works on certain stages. So then if he's on a stage in which he can't use the fish, it's no biggie because he still has 3 other supers. I think that might be the best way to do it. But I know Chrollo is super popular, and people will be pretty upset if he's not included. So maybe I could say he's more likely than Biscuit, but I think they're both super likely. I think they're both just as likely, so I think I'll keep Biscuit first and then Chrollo. Where was I? Not Phaeton. Not this guy. This guy would be another textbook lockdown assist. If they were going to do the assist-only character thing, you could have Bloster or this guy, but I think there would be very little reason to have both because they would both be, like I said, a textbook lockdown super of them just coming in, gunning the opponent down, and then piecing out. Genthru. Okay. I think Genthru is such a lame villain. I think he's so lame. But I hate to admit that if he were put in the game, he would make the best candidate for the Premier Grappler, and that would automatically make me play him. Because him having a command grab that leads to his opponent exploding would be such a fun command grab. And there's at least one other character on here that could be a candidate for a command grab character. But I think compared to Genthru is way more likely to be the actual Premier Grappler. And I was also thinking, okay, yeah, he could have a command grab. He grabs the opponent. It stops for a second. He says, "Have you heard of the bomber?" And then they blow up, right? He could just do the explosion as part of the command grab animation. But I was also thinking, how sick would it be if instead of exploding the opponent automatically as part of the animation, what if he does a command grab and he just punches them or something or throws them, and then similar to Havoc from Mortal Kombat 1, he has access to an unblockable that he can just activate whenever he wants. So in Mortal Kombat 1's case, Havoc is able to put this mucusy tether on the opponent, and you can finish a combo with that tether being on them. And then, as the opponent's waking up, Havoc can break his own neck, and it forces the opponent to break their neck as well, because the tether kind of turns his own body into a voodoo doll, so to speak. And so it forces them to wake up into an unblockable, which leads to a second combo. The game counts it as a second combo, but for all intents and purposes and all practicality, it is actually just one big combo. So I think it would be so cool if you could combo into Genthru's command grab and knock the opponent down, and then as they're getting up, you detonate them, which leads into another combo, which is essentially one big combo. I think that would automatically put him on my team, even though I think he's such a lame villain. Also, aside from him just having really good moveset potential, he is technically the main villain from the Greed Island arc, even though I think more people probably like Razor. If Genthru weren't here, that would mean having a vacancy, just having a missing main villain from one of the main arcs, which would be kind of weird. So I think Genthru actually has a really high chance of being added, and I think he should be added. Everybody's going to think of Biscuit and Chrollo, but I think not enough people are going to think about the potential for Genthru. Oh, also, I was talking about his goons. Obviously, his goons have a pretty much 0% chance of being added as their own characters, but I think you could incorporate the goons into his moveset. He could call the goons in, and it could be similar a little bit to the putties that Zed can call in Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, because Genthru is such a lame character, right? He's kind of just he's kind of a bully character, right? With his two goons running around having to do a lot of his dirty work for him. So I think him being able to call in his goons, that would also be really consistent with the character, but it would also balance out his moveset. It would kind of buff out his moveset with other things besides just punching and kicking and command grabbing, right? So if you had the punching and kicking and command grabbing into the unblockable on Wake Up, and he had goons that he could call in from off screen behind the opponent, like the putties from Power Rangers Battle for the Grid that Zed can call in, I think that would make for pretty much a perfect moveset that writes itself. Phaeton, Jing. Some people might think it's weird if Jing isn't in, because I've watched a few other of these types of videos, and a lot of people say how they want Jing in the game, but Jing literally never shows off any kind of nin ability, and he doesn't even fight at all in the entire show. So I think it would be really dumb if Aiding had to make an entire moveset from scratch. I think that would be having to use way too much creative liberty. I think the only reason Jing would get into the game is if Togashi were actually willing to spill the beans and explain his entire moveset, and that would be the only way to justify it. I heard some people saying something along the lines of, oh, that would be like having a One Piece fighting game with no Shanks. And I kind of see where they're coming from, but the big difference is that Shanks actually does stuff in One Piece, and Shanks is actually cool. He's not some bum dad that just sits around, right? So that's my stance on Jing. The gorilla guy, I don't remember this guy's name, and I don't think he's popular enough, and I don't think he has enough of a presence to merit being a character, because if he were going to be a playable character, he would probably be a Puppet Master archetype with the gorillas, but I think there is another character from the show that would make a much better Puppet Master archetype, which would automatically bump this guy out from having a chance. So I think we're just going to give him an honorable mention, because I think the gorillas as an assist would be pretty cool. But that's the only reason you would want to play this guy, is for the gorillas, right? So that makes him kind of one note. And so if you had an assist that called in the gorillas, that would be kind of cool. But if you were to be a playable character and you just called in gorillas that did stuff, it would be kind of cool. But like I said, there's going to be a character that I talk about that would have way more potential for being a puppet master than this guy. So this guy is just an honorable mention. I was on this side. I think Hanzo, just by nature of him being a ninja, gives him a decent chance. And when I first started watching the show and they introduced him, I thought, oh yeah, surely he'll be in the game because he's a ninja, right? He's going to start doing a bunch of ninja stuff in the show. But after the Hunter exam arc, he doesn't have much of a presence at all. And he never showcases a Nin ability. And also, I think the main thing against his chances is that Killua would be the resident speed demon cross-up character. And that is typically what you would expect from a ninja archetype, right? So even though Killua isn't per se a ninja, he's not a ninja per se by technicality, but I think Killua would just inherently fill the ninja archetype in terms of gameplay. And I think that's why Hanzo would be a little bit redundant. But I'm going to put him in possible because I could see it maybe later. It depends how big the roster is going to be, right? If the roster is going to be huge, then I think he would be added. But if the roster is going to be a bit more, if we're being a bit more realistic on our roster size predictions, I think Hanzo would have to get relegated to DLC. I was on this row. They could do Ikalgo as a joke character. I was kind of torn between putting him as assist only as an honorable mention or actually considering him to be a real character. I'll put him in unlikely but possible because that would add a lot of variety. Yeah, you could do a moveset with the bullets, I think. What else could he do? He could do the bullets, but he could also take over a corpse, right? That would be funny if you actually could take over the corpse of your opponent that you beat. But then, would you have access to their moves? Maybe. I feel as if I'm forgetting something he can do. Maybe not. That's why I'll put him in possible but unlikely. I'll probably end up putting him at the bottom of unlikely but possible once we fill it up a bit more. Illumi, I think I'm going to put him, I think he's kind of in between likely and unlikely. I think upon first thought, it would be hard to make a moveset for him. But he does have a pretty big presence in the show. And the more you think about it, you could do a moveset. Because he could call in his zombies. He could call in zombies that have the acupuncture needle in them already. That would kind of be similar to calling in the putties from Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. So maybe they wouldn't want Genthru and Illumi to do that if they were both in the game. But let's just evaluate each character's chances on their own, right? Because we don't know if Genthru is going to be added. So if Genthru weren't added, but Illumi were to possibly be added, they could have Illumi call in the zombies like the putties that Zed can call in from Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. But also he could call in the trucks from the final arc of the show, the trucks that are being driven by his zombies. I think that would be pretty crazy. Maybe that would be a super. He could throw the needles, right? So it's definitely possible, but it would be kind of unconventional because when I first started watching the show, I was thinking, man, manipulators might get the short end of the stick in terms of being added to a fighting game because it's just a lot harder to come up with a moveset for a manipulator. You can't have a manipulator just take over the opponent's character and tell them what to do. That would be obviously broken and not very fun. But if he were already controlling zombies and he had access to those zombies, I think that would be the way to do it. I was on this row. No one else on this row. Oh, Gotoh. Yeah. Okay. So Gotoh, I'll put him here because he would be kind of similar to Bloster and this guy whose name I forget in terms of it being a projectile assist. But I think instead of it being a lockdown assist, in that it would fire a bunch of coins. So Gotoh can fire the coins, right? I think that would be a cool move in a fighting game, but that's all he does, which is why I don't think he would be a playable character. And I don't think it would be a lockdown assist if he were an assist-only character, just theorizing that for fun. I don't think it would be like Bloster in him just firing off a bunch of coins in a straight line for a few seconds. That would be a lockdown assist, right? I think instead of that, he would probably fire multiple coins really fast back to back at different angles. Maybe the first coin would shoot out directly in front of him, but then he would progressively aim up higher and higher, and it would be more of like an anti-air projectile, which would allow you more combo ability if you want to keep juggling the opponent. I think that's probably how they would do the Gotoh coin as an assist. So we're going to put him there as an honorable mention. I think out of all the butlers, Gotoh would be, if any butler gets represented, it would be Gotoh, because Gotoh does the most fighting. And actually, never mind. I just remembered the another butler, but I still think that of all the butlers, Gotoh is the most likely to get representation if only one is going to be put in the game. There is another butler, though, coming up that I would want to put in the assist only / honorable mention category. Where was I? I think I was on this row. I think this guy's name was Kastro. I will put him in unlikely, but possible, because his moveset is essentially the exact same as Chizuru from King of Fighters. I was literally thinking when I watched that fight with him, when they were explaining his ability, I thought this is exactly like Chizuru. It's the same kind of mix-up that he's able to put people in. But he literally just shows up once and dies, and that whole arc is pretty much just to establish the power system in the whole show, and I don't think anybody particularly cares about him. So I'm going to probably keep him at the end of unlikely. I just said Ikalgo would be at the end, but I think Ikalgo is a lot more likely than this guy. I was on this row. Kite. I think Kite, very likely. I think Kite would be a no-brainer. He would be the premier RNG character. The one challenge, though, is that not all of his weapons were shown off in the show, right? So he has that roulette wheel, and whatever number he gets determines the weapon he has to fight with. So in the show, we only saw his sword, his scythe, and the gun, right? Only 3 things. So I guess they could have it only give him those options. I guess you could have it only give him the options that we've seen in the show. It would be kind of weird seeing that he just never gets the other numbers in the game, but I could understand why they would do that, because you don't want them to make something up. I think this is one of those cases where they need to shake Togashi down and actually get an answer, because Kite would be such a perfect RNG fighting game character that they would really benefit from getting information on what the other weapons are. But even if you were to only be stuck with the sword, the scythe, or the gun, that would still be really cool. But I think a lot of people need to remember that it was said in the show that when he gets a number, he has to use that weapon, and he can't put that weapon up until the fight is done. So he wouldn't be RNG switching his weapons out multiple times in the same fight. He would have to at least defeat one opponent. He would have to KO at least one opponent before he gets a chance to switch his weapon out in the game. And I think people need to remember that. But that would be really cool, and I think I'll put him more likely than Genthru, because I think he's more popular. I think it would be easier to make a moveset for Genthru, but it's just way too enticing to have a weird RNG character. The only other RNG character I can think of besides Darkstalker's Cienko or Lele is, I guess 2. The only 2 other RNG characters I can think of in fighting games is, I was going to say Tira, firstly, Tira from Soul Calibur, but additionally there is Faust from Guilty Gear. So RNG characters are an archetype, more or less. Even though Faust isn't similar to Tira at all, just saying an RNG character, there is some kind of precedent established in fighting games to have RNG characters. Obviously, RNG isn't something you expect. RNG isn't something a lot of people expect from fighting games, but there are RNG characters, and that's what makes them so fun, and that's what makes them stand out. So Kite, I would be pretty disappointed if Kite weren't in the game, because it's just, making the moveset isn't low-hanging fruit, but the idea of putting him in the game is low-hanging fruit. So if they pass that low-hanging fruit up, I will be pretty disappointed. He's at least getting in with DLC, if this game does get DLC. I was on this row. Knov. I think Knov should be an honorable mention. He could teleport you. He could take you into a portal and then have you reappear somewhere else as an assist. kind of similar to Kung Lao from Mortal Kombat 1. I think that would be pretty cool. Knuckle, okay. I'm going to put Knuckle, Knuckle, I think, is kind of in between likely and unlikely. I'm going to put him right here by Illumi, and I'm not going to talk about him until I get to Shoot, because I kind of want to talk about Knuckle and Shoot together at the same time. This guy could maybe be an honorable mention if you want the Surf Wave, but I'm not even going to bother. I just thought of it now while passing him. I forget her name, but oh, I completely forgot about something that Kurapika could do. See, I was saying how loaded Kurapika's potential was for a moveset. I forgot something I was wanting to talk about. So I forget her name, but she's the girl with the nin stitches from the Phantom Troop. I'm going to put her in unlikely. And the reason I'm putting her in unlikely is because I think her nin stitch ability would make her, if she were to be put in the game, that would make her a trap character, some kind of setup and trap character, and she could set up invisible traps with the nin stitches, right? Which would kind of be similar to Byakuya from Under Night. He can set up invisible webs, which is an invisible trap. Or Testament from Guilty Gear XX. Testament has these really dumb invisible traps he can set up. But the reason I'm putting her in unlikely is because Kurapika could do the same exact thing with his chains. In fact, he literally does just that in the fight with Uvo. He literally leaves his chains strewn about and it turns them invisible. And Uvo eventually gets wrapped up in them, right? He eventually walks into Kurapika's invisible chain trap. So he literally used it like Byakuya's trap from Under Night. So I don't think there's any reason to give that to her when Kurapika is already in the game. Like I said, you can make Kurapika one of the coolest fighting game characters ever. So just don't take away something that Kurapika can do just to justify, purely to justify her existence in the fighting game, right? So I think Kurapika just inherently prevents her from being in the game, even though in a vacuum, I do think you could make a cool moveset for her. Starting to lose track of which row I'm on. I was on this one. Meleoron, if I'm remembering the name correctly. I'm going to put him in honorable mentions. I think having an assist that makes you invisible would be pretty self-explanatory. I don't know if other fighting games do invisibility outside of Mortal Kombat. I can't think of any on the top of my head. But in Mortal Kombat, in multiple Mortal Kombat games, there have been characters that could turn invisible, and obviously the benefit of that is that you can't see mix-ups coming. And of course, it would be timed because Meleoron has to hold his breath for it to be working, right? So I'm going to put that as more likely than Gorillas. Maybe less likely than Knov. I think a teleport makes a lot more... I think a teleport is a lot more expected in a versus-style fighting game than a invisibility, just because invisibility is more of a Mortal Kombat thing. I was here because I think I saw Melody. Yeah, Melody is going in the honorable mentions. Even though she never actually fights directly, her flute being able to affect people's psychology, being able to affect people's psyche, I think that could, if she were going to be an assist-only character, if characters were going to be in the game that were assist-only, she could do some kind of meter manipulation, right? There's a character in JoJo's All-Star Battle R, Akira, with Red Hot Chili Peppers. He comes in, plays his guitar, and as he's playing his guitar, your meter is filling up. And if he gets hit, then it stops. So when he's in playing the guitar, you want to do it with him being... You want to do it when your opponent is far away, or you want to do it after you knock your opponent down and you can get in front of him, so then you can just block and protect him. That sort of situation. So I think Melody could come in, play her flute, do some kind of meter manipulation, right? Whether it be giving you meter or stealing meter from the opponent, or like locking the opponent out of meter for a while, something like that. I think that would be interesting. And I saw Youpi. Yeah, Youpi. I'm putting Youpi in likely. I think Youpi's actually more likely than Genthru, but I'll put him beside Kite. Yeah, so I haven't gotten to Neferpitou yet. I think Neferpitou is pretty much guaranteed to be in, and I think Youpi actually would have an easier time. You would have an easier time making a moveset for Youpi than Neferpitou, but Neferpitou is so popular. I think that's why Neferpitou has higher chances than Youpi. Youpi's moveset would be insane, by the way. I think Youpi would have a very high chance of being on my team if they incorporate his moves from the show in the way that I'm imagining, right? He's able to transform his body at will, so the moveset writes itself, and his super could be the giant explosion, and he has multiple different forms in the show, so he could transform into different forms as the match goes on, or like based on how much meter you have, or something like that. The reason why I'm not putting him as likely as Neferpitou, though, is, well, I'll put Neferpitou up with Biscuit and Chrollo. The reason why I'm not having him as high as Neferpitou, despite being not as popular as Neferpitou, is because I haven't gotten to Pouf yet, but I think Pouf is the one royal guard out of the three that would be incredibly hard to make a moveset for. I have no idea how you would do Pouf, okay? I think Pouf is unlikely just because of that. Maybe Aiden can do it, but I personally cannot think of how to make a moveset for Pouf. So if Pouf had to be excluded, but you put Youpi and Neferpitou in the game, I think it would be weird to have two of the three royal guards only leaving out one. I think it would be less weird if you only had one and left out two. And if you were to only have one, it would have to be Neferpitou, right? So that's why I'm thinking Youpi isn't super likely, because I think Youpi would only be added. I think Youpi would only have a decent chance if Pouf were to also be in the game. Because if Pouf can get in, Youpi definitely can get in. But if Pouf isn't going to get in, I don't know if they would want to have two of the three, because then it feels as if you're picking on Pouf a little bit more than if you were to just have Neferpitou, right? Because if Neferpitou were in the game, you would think, okay, it's because of her popularity. Where was I? Must have been here, because Meruem is here. Meruem is pretty much guaranteed. You can't have a Hunter x Hunter game without him, right? Hunter x Hunter doesn't really have a main overarching villain, but the most popular arc is the Chimera Ant arc, and he is the villain in that arc. So, for lack of a better term, he is the main villain in the show, or at least he is what most people consider to be the main villain. And also, he was, yet again, one of the other characters, yet another character that got in over Leorio in Jump Force. So he is pretty much guaranteed, even more than Biscuit and Chrollo. I guess his moveset would be pretty simple. He's just going to be punching and kicking and a tail whipping. But if he were in the game, I think they should probably make it his self after eating Youpi's cells, because then he has access to shooting out that giant explosion and also growing the wings, because why would you not want him to have more moves, especially because before eating Youpi's cells, he, like I said, he just punches and kicks and uses his tail, which would be fine, but it should be after he ate Youpi's cells if you want him to have some sauce. It would also be after he ate Pouf's cells, but again, I have no idea how you would use Pouf abilities in a fight. So if it were the version, if it were resurrected Meruem, then I don't know how he would be using the Pouf abilities. So he would have access to Pouf abilities, but he would probably only use the Youpi abilities mid-combat, despite him having access to both of their abilities. I was here. So new row. Morel. Okay, this is the character I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about Puppet Master archetypes. Morel has insane moveset potential for a Puppet Master archetype. I'm going to put him... I would put him over Kite if it were just down to moveset potential, but I think Kite might be a little bit more popular, so I'm going to put him right by Kite, but more than Youpi and Genthru. Morel could have the smoke clones. That would write itself, right? And he could do so much other stuff with the smoke. And I think it would also be really cool to have a Puppet Master setup and trap type character with a big body, right? Because Morel is pretty big and he swings around with that giant pipe. Normally, Puppet Master archetypes are kind of small, or at least not big. And they usually don't have big normals, right? Because why would you need big normals if you're going to be hitting the opponent with your puppets? But in this case, I think it would be really cool if Morel kind of was an exception, if he was kind of a standout puppet master archetype in that he also has big normals. So then let's say you get some kind of smoke clone hit from far away. You could hit confirm it from really far away because you could reach with the pipe. I think that would be sick, and Morel has the potential to be one of the coolest characters in the game. I didn't even know about this guy before watching the show, but after watching the show, he puts in so much work in the Chimera Ant arc. He has to tank so much aggro, and he does so much in that arc. I don't hear people talk about him very much. Like I said, I didn't even know who he was before watching the show, but he really does do some of the most stuff in the show. He does more than Kite in the show. So I think he should be more popular than Kite, but he's not. So I'm going to put him right behind Kite. But Morel is a no-brainer. There's Neferpitou, however you say her name. Way more than Youpi. I'll put her, I would put her more likely than Biscuit, but Biscuit got into jump force over her, so I'm going to maybe put her right after Biscuit. But I still think everyone up to Morel is pretty much a 99% chance of getting in. Neferpitou, she doesn't, okay, so obviously she would be fast. She would probably have access to some cross-ups. She would probably skip neutral, right? Because before she reveals her Nin ability in the show, she's able to jump from so far away and pretty much instantaneously appear somewhere because she's able to jump and kick off of something so hard. So that would probably be her thing, is that she just skips neutral and forces you to react to cross-ups or things like that really fast. So I don't think her moveset would be super saucy, but her Nin ability with the puppet strings would be pretty cool. I don't think she would use it on an opponent at all. I think the only way they would incorporate that is her using the puppet strings on herself to make herself faster, which was seen when she was fighting Gon, because she can only use the puppet strings on somebody who's dead, and I think knocking someone out and then using the puppet strings on them would just be, I think that would be, even for aiding, a little too goofy. I was talking about that before with Ikalgo. But like I said, Neferpitou can use it on herself, and that's probably how they're going to do it. Maybe it could be an install to make her even faster. Something like that. But she's just so popular, and even before I watched Hunter x Hunter, I saw so much fan art of her. She's definitely one of the most popular characters, even if it's just her design. So she pretty much has to be in the game. Her and Meruem are no-brainers. If just two Chimera Ants get in the game, it'll be them. It'll be Meruem and Neferpitou. And again, I think Youpi has better potential for a moveset than Neferpitou, but she's just so much more popular, and if these two were to get into the game, it would be weird with Poof being left out. So that slightly decreases the chances of Youpi, in my opinion. I was on this row. What was her name? It was a weird name. Began with a P, right? She is yet another Phantom Troop member who would just be... There are some Phantom Troop members. Some people probably want all of the Phantom Troop members to be in the game. I think that only some of them are actually fighting game viable in terms of their moveset potential. But out of all of the characters, she is probably, or out of all of the Phantom Troop members, she is probably the least likely to be added, just because her ability is pretty much pure utility. Yeah, she has a gun, but there are just so many other characters that would be better for a fighting game. Okay, I'm on this row now. Unlike her, here is a Phantom Troop member that I think does have a really good chance. One of the few Phantom Troop members that I think could qualify for fighting game status is Nobunaga. I'll put him over Youpi. Yeah, okay, I'll put him over Youpi. Because if they aren't going to have every Phantom Troop member, they probably want to definitely include some, aside from Chrollo. So Nobunaga, so many fighting games have a resident Iaido character, right? And he would be this game's resident Iaido character. But in addition to just being a typical Iaido stance character, he would have the AoE bubble, right? If you walk into his infield, you just automatically get attacked. So I think that would be a really cool stance to have just this bubble around himself. And if you walk into it, it's an automatic hitbox, right? Something like that. I think that would be a really cool take on the Iaido character. He wouldn't be super complex because of it, but like I said, so many fighting games seem to feel compelled to have one, and in this case, it would be a slightly more interesting Iaido character than some other games. I was on... I remember seeing these guys, so I must have passed them up. Palm. I think Palm, very likely. Similar to Biscuit, there aren't very many female characters they could add that could have a moveset. Palm being one of them, but also even aside from her being a girl, her moveset could be really cool with the hair clothes. She could be a super armor character. I think that would be really fun with the hair clothing super armor. I don't know if she would ever have her remote viewing nin ability used at all in combat, but even if it's just the hair, that would be enough. You could definitely make a moveset with just the hair. I'm going to put her... I'll put her more likely than Kite. Yeah, I'll put her more likely than Kite, but less likely than Chrollo. I think we already have all the female characters that I was going to put on here. Biscuit, Neferpitou, and Palm. I might be forgetting somebody who I will see as I go down the list. But like I said, there wouldn't be very many female character candidates. So with it just being 3, I think these 3 have a very high chance of being added. Yeah, I have her down here in unlikely, but I'm feeling way more confident about everything in the top 2 rows. Well, obviously the top row, but everything in likely I'm feeling confident about, and the things in unlikely are a lot more iffy. So I think if we were to only get 3 female characters in the game, it would be Biscuit, Neferpitou, and Palm. I also, thinking of the hair armor again, maybe they could make that an install, but I think she would probably just be in hair armor form at all times, and certain moves would have super armor. Something like that. That would be pretty cool. I would probably play her a lot if she were a super armor character. Okay, I was on this row. Here's Phinx. I think Phinx has a chance of being in the game. I think he is one of the Phantom Troop members that you could create a moveset out of, but it's just too one note, and compared to other Phantom Troop members, it's not as saucy. I think being able to wind up the punch before attacking would be really fun. When he said that in the show, I immediately thought of Donkey Kong's punch from Smash Bros, because in Smash Bros, I think it's his neutral special. You hit neutral special, Donkey Kong starts winding up a punch, and the more you wind it up, the stronger it is, and you can store it. You can store the energy that Donkey Kong has built up. So then if you watch an actual Donkey Kong player play, he tries to sneak in the arm swing whenever he can. So then whenever he does want to hit the opponent, he's expending all of that charge he has wound up. So I think that would be pretty cool to have Phinx be Donkey Kong. But aside from that, he doesn't really do anything, and I think him being one note is the one thing that's keeping him from being likely. Yeah, I think this order is how I'm feeling right now. Pike! Okay, Pokkle. Speaking of Pike, I'm going to put Pokkle in unlikely. I don't think he's very popular. He doesn't really do much in the show, but he does have a bow with flaming arrows as his nin ability. And a lot of fighting games apparently like having bow characters. They seem to like having bow characters, and Aiding has done bow characters before because Hawkeye is in Marvel vs. Capcom. So I think that increases his chances slightly just with Aiding having experience with bow characters, but pretty unlikely. I'll put him above Kastro because he has more relevancy than Kastro, but I don't think anybody would be particularly wanting him think people would be more excited about Phinx, even if Phinx only punches people. I'm going to give B-Girl an honorable mention. Obviously, we don't even ever see her Nin ability, but she's able to control bees. I'm pretty sure that's not Nin related. Well, maybe it is. She was obviously controlling the bees in the Hunter exam before she would know what Nin is. But maybe she was just unknowingly using Nin. Maybe she's actually a manipulator and she was able to somehow manipulate the bees without realize what she was doing. But my point is that all she has is the bees, right? That would be kind of a lame moveset, but I'm going to give her an honorable mention because I kind of like her design. She does have some presence in the show. I would assume that she has some fans. And I think the bees, while they couldn't make for a complete moveset, it would be a cool assist. It could be like a mini Stalking Flare, Dormammu's Stalking Flare from Marvel vs. Capcom. A swarm of bees could be a slow-moving tracking projectile, right? And the opponent just eventually is forced to block it as they try to escape it, right? So I think that would be cool. Even though, assist characters are probably not going to be a thing, I had to give her a shout-out. Ramot. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what I'm looking at. I'm assuming that's a Chimera Ant. Oh, I think I know what that is now, yeah. Okay, I think we're done with that row. I don't think any of the villains that are exclusive to the Heaven's Arena arc really have any fans or anything. They were kind of just one-off villains to introduce the power system, so I'm not going to put him on the list. Or him. Or did I pass up? Yeah, I passed up him already. The guy that looks like a water bear. You know what? I'll put him in honorable mention for the assists. I think the spinny tops could maybe make for a decent assist. But he's the only one of the three that would be interesting. Here's Poof. Yeah, so I think Poof being unlikely. I'll put him after Ikalgo. If Aiden can come up with a moveset for him, I think they are 100% adding all three of the Royal Guards. But again, that'll just come down to Aiden's creativity. So I'm going to kind of put him in the middle here. And again, this is the one reason why Youpi isn't up with Neferpitou. Shizuku. I'm going to put her in unlikely. The only reason why I think she's worth considering is because she seems really popular. I'll put her above Kastro, not above Pokkle. She seems so popular, but I think a lot of people need to remember that the vacuum does not work on living things, but it does for some reason work on blood. I thought that was really weird because I thought it wouldn't work on blood considering blood has living cells in it, but it might just be dependent on what the definition of living is in this universe, right? So maybe when she said it only works on living things, it means sentient things. So cells aren't sentient, so maybe that's why it works on blood, right? Because when I first thought of Shizuku, I thought it would be so cool. Oh, she could suck people in. She could have vacuum moves, right? It would kind of be like Iron Tiger's magnetism, but that wouldn't work because, like I said, it doesn't work on people. So how would you incorporate the vacuum if the only thing it could really do against a person is suck out their blood? I was thinking it could work kind of similar to the camera, to Frank West's camera in Marvel vs. Capcom and also Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. So Frank can take a picture, but he can take a picture whenever, but you really want to take a picture when the combo counter is high. So you rack up a big combo and you're trying to level up with Frank West. He's able to get levels. And you're able to level it up. I've never actually played Frank West, so I might be off a little bit on the detail. So if there are any Frank West players, feel free to correct me. He's not very popular either, so I don't think I've ever fought against any Frank West. But Frank West is able to level up, and he's able to level up a lot faster, a lot more all at once if he takes a picture of a bigger combo counter. So you want to get a really big combo count number, a really big hit number on your combo, and then you call Frank West in, and he takes a picture of it, and that gives him XP to level up, right? I was thinking it could be like that for Shizuku. So if she's able to suck the blood out of people, it means you would have to hit them and give them wounds, right? You would have to make them bleed before you could suck the blood out of their body, like in her fight with Pike, which was the worst fight in the entire show, by the way, but that's beside the point. So maybe she could do these really big combos on people, and then when the combo counter is high, you could activate the vacuum, and instead of her leveling up like Frank West, it would just cash out more damage. So you could try to do a big combo and then use the vacuum as the combo ender to suck out a bunch of blood, and the amount of damage it does is proportionate to how big of a hit number you had on the combo. I think that's probably the only way you can incorporate the vacuum. I really hope that aiding doesn't forget about the fact that it can't work on living things, right? But aiding is really true to source material when it comes to their other games, such as, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom and Marvel, and I've never played the original Dungeon Fighter, but as far as I'm aware, I think DNF Duel is very faithful to the original. Also, I wanted to say this at the beginning of the video, but I forgot. I know a lot of people are probably not super confident about aiding being the developer, with DNF Duel being their most recent fighting game. A lot of people, including myself, are not fans of DNF Duel. In fact, I was actually complaining about DNF Duel before anybody. A lot of people... I hear a lot of people's complaints about DNF Duel are purely because of the game just lacking support or balance or whatever, but my problems with DNF Duel run way deeper than that, and I thought that the inherent game design of it was bad, or not bad per se, but just really boring and dry, and that's why I didn't like it. I have videos on my channel. You can go back and listen to why I didn't like that game. But the reason why that isn't making me more skeptical about DNF Duel's development capabilities is because I honestly think that the dryness of DNF Duel was specifically mandated by Arc System Works, because the publisher was Neopol, or whatever it's called, right? The company that has DNF, or Dungeon Fighter, and they outsourced it to Arc System Works, who I guess they in turn hired aiding to do a lot of the work on the game, or maybe Neopol got both of them together. But anyways, my point is that aiding was kind of working under Arc System Works, who was also developing the game. Aiding was not the pure developer. As far as I can tell, aiding did the majority of the gameplay stuff, and Arc System Works obviously did the graphics for DNF Duel. But my point is that because they had other developers over them, in this case being Arc System Works, and just seeing Arc System Works' current design philosophy, namely talking about their philosophy with Guilty Gear Strive, I think it is very likely that the dryness of DNF Duel was not necessarily aiding's, was not 100% aiding's idea that they had for the game. I think it was actually mandated by Arc System Works, because I think Arc System Works wanted to keep the game, quote, beginner friendly, or whatever Arc System Works thought was beginner friendly. So they wanted to keep certain things slow. They didn't want any kind of grounded overheads. They wanted very little incentive for motion inputs, that sort of thing. I don't think aiding themselves would come up with that. I really do believe that Arc System Works kind of mandated that. But because now aiding is the sole developer of this game and Bushiroad Games is the only publisher, and because Bushiroad Games has never developed a fighting game before, I don't think Bushiroad Games would have any kind of real input to give aiding. I don't think Bushiroad Games would walk in and tell aiding they have to develop it a certain way in terms of the actual gameplay design. I think in this case, they are 100% leaving all of the gameplay up to aiding's discretion. And I think if aiding is left to their own devices, they come up with something way more crazy and way better than DNF Duel. Okay, I should have said that at the beginning, but I forgot. Maybe I'll make a separate timestamp for that discussion. I was talking about Shizuku, right? So I was on this row, I think. Okay, shoot. We got to shoot. So now I want to talk about Knuckle and Shoot together. I actually think that Shoot would have a way better moveset than Knuckle. I think it would be way easier to make a fun moveset for Shoot. Specifically because it would be really easy to come up with moves for the floating hands, but also he could be a flight cancel character. He could have a flight in which he stands on his hand, and he could have these awesome flight cancel combos, which is something aiding has done before with some of their other flight characters, right? I think the one challenging part with developing Shoot would be his other ability. I forgot what it was called, but his ability in which he is able to essentially steal somebody's body part. He's able to scrape part of their body off and store it in the little bird cage, or is it a lantern? I think it's a bird cage. He's able to, not destroy body parts, but steal body parts and hide them in the cage, right? I was trying to think, how would you incorporate that into the fighting game? On one hand, the floating hands are probably enough of a gimmick that he could have an entire moveset based purely on that. But I really do think aiding would want to try to incorporate everything. So the one way I thought of that you could incorporate the body part stealing is, imagine if he had a super. Imagine if it were relegated to a super, okay? And in the super, he steals the opponent's eye, similar to what he did to Killua when he was fighting Killua, right? And so the super, maybe it doesn't do a lot of damage. The super isn't necessarily for the damage, but it is for the utility. So imagine you have the super animation play out, you take the opponent's eye, and then, because the opponent's eye is missing, it gives him access to a cross-up move. Let's say he had access to the cross-up move already, okay? Let's say it's a cross-up move, but it's super reactable, and people are able to block it really easily. But what if, after stealing the opponent's eye, you essentially roleplay that the opponent has a blind spot? So now that cross-up move is buffed, and when you do the cross-up move, when you get within a certain range of the opponent, you become invisible. And that's how the opponent would be role-playing that their eye is missing. So imagine he gets access to a cross-up move that essentially gives him invisibility when he does it, so then you literally have to guess. You can't see where he's coming from. Or maybe I guess it would make more sense if he only turns invisible if he goes behind you or something. But let's say it's not a cross-up move, but a move that puts him behind you, right? And then if he's invisible behind you for a second, if his invisibility lasts for a second or something, he's able to do an overhead low mix-up. I think that would be a really cool way to incorporate it. And like I said, that's the only way I can think of it. Hopefully, aiding is creative enough to think of something like that, or are skilled enough to pull something like that off, because coming up with something like that and then balancing it, those are two separate issues, right, that would both need to be addressed. But I think it would be kind of lame if he only had the hands and they didn't try to incorporate the body part stealing at all. And I think stealing the eye, he doesn't need to be able to steal every body part. That would be way too much. That would be too hard to program. But if he could at least steal an opponent's eye with a super, and it gave him some kind of access to a blind spot that the opponent would have to role play with some kind of invisibility, I think that would be really cool. And now I can talk about Knuckle. I said I wanted to talk about Knuckle once I talked about Shoot. I think Knuckle, obviously, his whole gimmick would be a timeout thing, right? You put APR on the opponent, and I guess you could assume that the meter is the aura, right? So they would essentially be in debt with their meter, and then if it puts them into a forced state of Zetsu, then I would assume, gameplay-wise, that would be locking the opponent out of using meter. You could definitely do that. Some people might think that's too gimmicky or weird, but this is aiding we're talking about, and aiding has kind of done similar things to this before with Phinx, for example. Not Phinx, right? Not the lawyer, but I mean Marvel Phinx, X-Men Phinx in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Her whole game plan was to get to a certain amount of meter before dying, and then she gets to resurrect as Dark Phoenix, and she becomes the best character in the entire game. And so many people complained about her when the game came out, right? So even though that's a little different, it's kind of similar in the sense that Phinx is trying to stall to a point where she has enough meter, right? So Knuckle would obviously be a stall character. His whole game plan would revolve around stalling until the opponent is just locked out of using meter. It's definitely doable, and Knuckle is kind of popular, so I do think he has a decent chance of being added, but that's kind of lame. And I think that's the one thing that makes him unlikely instead of likely, is just because it's kind of lame. If Knuckle weren't in the show, I would put Shoot in likely, because I think, like I said, Shoot has a really good moveset or he has a really good potential for a moveset, as I described. But I think they would be apprehensive about putting Shoot in the game, but not Knuckle. So I think Shoot's likelihood is kind of limited by Knuckles' likelihood. So I'm going to put Shoot by Knuckle. I think if Knuckle gets in the game, Shoot automatically becomes likely. But if Knuckle isn't in the game, I think that makes Shoot even less likely than Knuckle. See what I mean by that? That's why I wanted to wait to talk about them. Because I know Knuckle's a lot more popular than Shoot. I knew about Knuckle loosely before watching the show, but I had no idea who Shoot was before watching the show, but I knew who Knuckle was. So I think that's just a testament to how much more popular Knuckle is, even though I think Shoot would make for a much more fun fighting game character. Okay, that's my explanation on them. You know what? I'm actually going to put Illumi after Knuckle and Shoot. Because they do a lot more fighting, right? And they are in the Chimera Ant arc. Yeah, I think I'll put them in unlikely but possible, especially because they're kind of on the border of likely and unlikely, in my opinion. With Shoot being kind of limited by Knuckles' chances, and Knuckles' chances only being hindered by it being kind of lame. Let's go with that. I was on this row. I'll give this guy an honorable mention. If the game did have assist-only characters, he could call out the dogs. I guess you could make that an assist. Her name just came back to me. Pakunoda. Where is she? Oh, I didn't even put her up here. Yeah, because she is so unlikely. Pakunoda, that's her name. It came back to me. I knew it began with a P. Is this the Phantom Troop member with the phone? Yeah, again, I just don't think manipulators just automatically would have a hard time justifying their inclusion in a fighting game. Okay. Silva. I think Silva would be really cool, but I think I haven't gotten to Zeno yet. I think Zeno would be slightly more likely than Silva, and if you add one of them, it kind of decreases the chances of adding another one. So I'm going to put him, I'll put him above Ikalgo. Yeah, I'll put him above Ikalgo, but below Hanzo. I'm assuming Silva is nearby, right? There he is. I mean, Zeno. He's Silva. He's Zeno. I skipped Uva. I'll get to him. I just want to do Zeno while I'm talking about Silva. I think Zeno is likely. I'll put him here. I'll put him after Genthru and Youpi. Because the game has to have a resident grappler, right? So these two are both pretty cool. You could make a move set for either of them, but like I said, it would probably be a little redundant to do both of them. So I think if you include one, it decreases the chances of the other. And if you had to pick one, I would pick Zeno because Silva just has the aura on his hands and makes explosions with them, which is kind of basic and one note, even though it is cool. But Zeno can send out the dragon aura. So I think being able to control a dragon on screen and have a bunch of attacks that have this big energy dragon appear, I think that would be much more interesting and fun and would give Aiding a bit more creativity than with Silva. So I think Zeno is likely, but not guaranteed. I think it's like a 99% chance. I think it's a pretty much guarantee on all of these characters up to Morel. And then once you get to Nobunaga, Youpi, Genthru, Zeno, it becomes... Maybe I should make a separate category. Let me do all but... Do I remember how to spell guaranteed? Guaranteed. Does Tier Maker have autocorrect? Oh, it does. Yeah, okay. So this must be spelled correctly since it doesn't have the red line. All but guaranteed. Let's make another row. Add row below. I'll say 99%. I'll keep Palm and Morel up there. Because that would just be dumb if Morel doesn't get added. Okay, let's do that. Confirmed, 99% chance of getting in. Likely, unlikely, but possible. Assist only. Okay. I had skipped Uvo. I think Uvo is very likely. Just because not only is he in one of the best fights in the whole show, Meruem versus Netero, I think, is probably considered by most to be the best fight. But then after Meruem versus Netero, Kurapika versus Uvo is probably everyone's second favorite fight, right? That's probably widely considered to be the second best fight, or at least one of the best. But also, I think he's likely because aside from Genthru, I'm not going to put 99% chance. I'm going to put him in. I'm going to put him by Genthru here. Aside from Genthru, I think he's the only potential candidate for being a command grab character. And it's a lot more obvious with Genthru. If you haven't seen the show in a while, you might be wondering, how would Uvo be the command grab character? Aside from him just, being big and strong, which is typical of grappler characters, because he doesn't ever do any kind of grab or grapple in the fight with Kurapika. But before he actually fights Kurapika himself, in the moments preceding it, when the Mafia is sending just a bunch of henchmen at him and he's killing a whole bunch of people, he is seen grabbing somebody and swinging them around for a moment. So even though he doesn't do it in an important fight or against a main character or anything like that, he does grab somebody and swing them around. I think he grabs them by the head and swings them around by the head and then throws them. So you could make that the command grab. Maybe he wouldn't be a premier grappler. If you were going to add Genthru and Uvo, Genthru would be the premier grappler, and I think Uvo would be more of just a big button character that happens to have a command grab. But if Genthru weren't in the game, you could kind of make Uvo the premier grappler. Typically, command grab characters don't really... The archetype of a grappler doesn't really exist in a 3v3 fighting game, even though there are characters with command grabs, and it's just because the whole game plan of a grappler to walk somebody down to the corner and make them scared of getting close to you doesn't really exist in the neutral that is 3v3 assist fighting games, because the neutral or the lack of neutral in 3v3 fighting games kind of eliminates the possibility or the viability of that playstyle, because it's typically just constant rushdown all the time. But even so, you can have characters with a command grab, such as Mike Hagar or the Hulk. I think the Hulk is probably a good character to look at in terms of what I mean. The Hulk is mostly about big buttons, and he's kind of just a big button rushdown character, but he does have a command grab, and coincidentally, in this case, Hulk's command grab literally is the same exact thing that Uvo does to some rando jobber in the show, because Hulk's command grab is he grabs you, he spins you around, and then throws you. But it's not something Hulk wants to do all the time. That's not the main thing he wants to land. Same with Hagar. Hagar has a command grab, but his biggest strength is his pipe, not the command grab. So maybe Uvo would actually fit the game's meta better than Genthru, so I'm going to put him by Genthru. I don't think both of them would be added. It would probably be one or the other in terms of having a character with a command grab. But if Uvo or Genthru get in the game, they are probably most definitely going to be on my team, because I always main grapplers, and I still get to play Netero, because with it being a 3v3 game, I don't have to be torn, should I play a grappler or should I play my favorite character from the show, right? With it being a 3v3 game, I can have my cake and eat it too. I get to play my favorite character, and I get to play a grappler. Unless they just have no synergy with each other or something like that. But typically in tag games, you can kind of make it work. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent. I was near the end, right? Yeah, I think I'll give a shout out to Worm. Worm, if the game were to have assist-only characters, Worm could be maybe not a ranged command grab when he comes out of the ground from behind the opponent, but it could be maybe a ranged hit grab, or maybe it could be a ranged command grab, but it's just reactable and you can jump. So you would only do it to whiff punish. It would be kind of similar to what I was conceptualizing for Netero's Hyper Beam after clasping the opponent in its hands, in the 100 type Guanyin statue's hands. I think Worm could come out and pin the opponent, right? Maybe like a restand. Kind of like Striker's handcuffing from Mortal Kombat 1. I think I'll make him... Yeah, I think I like that order for the assists. So let me see. Am I forgetting anyone that I should not be forgetting? Okay, here's the other butler I was mentioning. Not as likely as Gotoh, but if there were any other Butler to get any representation, I'm going to give an honorable mention to whatever her name was, the Butler that can transform into a bike, because I think being able to call in a bike would be a pretty great assist. So I'm going to put her probably less likely than Worm or the Gorilla guy. Probably less so than the Spinny Top guy, but I'll put the bike assist higher than the dog assist because the bike would be pretty funny. Also, I'm remembering Razor, who I somehow overlooked. Where is he? Okay, I finally found two that I had remembered that I somehow overlooked, and it took me so long to find them. I don't know why, but here they are. Razor. I'm going to put him in likely, actually. And even though Genthru is the actual final boss of the Greed Island arc, I think the dodgeball fight with Razor is way better than the Genthru fight. And I think because of that, he's a lot more popular. So that almost makes me want to put him as more likely than Genthru. But I think I'm going to put him right behind the command grab candidates because Genthru has a very clear archetype of what he would be, and that makes it maybe more enticing for a developer to make him into a fighting game character, whereas Razor would be a little bit more unorthodox, and he would be more of a zoner with the dodgeballs. But I'm going to put him in likely. I don't think Genthru and Razor would be put into the game, especially because I think Great Island is one of the lesser popular arcs, so I don't think they would want to do too much representation of that arc if they're not going to have a whole bunch of Chimera Ants or Phantom Troops, considering the York New arc and the Chimera Ant arcs are more popular. They would probably want the character ratios to be somewhat proportionate to the popularity of the arcs. So that's why I don't think Razor and Genthru would be in, but I could definitely see Razor over Genthru, so I'm going to put him beside them. Also, Tonpa. Okay, Tonpa, I think Ikalgo would probably be the best joke character, but if they wanted to go even jokier with it, I could see them doing Tonpa. Maybe I'll put him down here. They could do Tonpa if they wanted to go even more jokey with it. Maybe he could use the laxative juice as an attack or something. That would be pretty funny. They would have to purposefully make him bad on purpose, though, because it would be so dumb if he could go toe-to-toe with someone like Netero or Hisoka or Meruem, right? That would be insane. Okay, so now I actually have all of the characters I wanted to include. So if we were only going to assume the top 3 rows of characters to be added into the game, how many would that give us? That would give us 6, 12, 18, 19. That would give us 19 characters. They would probably want it to be an even number for the character select screen to be symmetrical. So I'm thinking maybe all of these characters from the top 3 rows plus one of the characters in unlikely. So maybe these 3 rows of characters plus Knuckle or Shoot. Oh, actually, never mind. I said it would be Genthru or Razor, right? So I don't think we would have both. So let's just say this top row of characters is 18 instead of 19. So then we could add Knuckle and Shoot. So I think a starting roster of Gon, Killua, Kurapika, Leorio, Hisoka, Netero, Meruem, Biscuit, Neferpitou, Chrollo, Kite, Palm, Morel, Nobunaga, Youpi, Genthru or Razor, Uvo, Zeno, Knuckle, and Shoot. I think that would be a really solid starting roster of characters. And I think 20 would be a really good number to shoot for. See what I did there? Normally in a fighting game, you can get by with maybe like 15 characters or something like that. But this is a 3v3 game. And when it comes to 3v3 games, you kind of need a bigger roster than a 1v1 game. Because, for example, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, I played that game when it first came out, when it only had 9 characters, and that is a 3v3 fighting game. And I stopped playing it really quickly when it was in the vanilla version, because with it only having 9 characters and it being a 3v3 game, I was constantly fighting the same characters over and over and over, right? Because if every team is going to be 3 of the 9 characters, you are going to be seeing the same characters pop up all the time. So I think that necessitates a bigger roster. Obviously, I went back to Power Rangers Battle for the Grid and had way more fun with it later once it had more characters. Once that game had more characters, it was way more fun. So I think in this case, I think they need to avoid that route with Power Rangers. Obviously, it's understandable if it has a really low budget. Power Rangers did have a really low budget. That's why it had to start with 9. And fortunately, the mechanics were good enough to carry it to a point where it could get more characters. But in this case, with it being a mobile game publisher, I'm assuming their budget is going to be decent because they are used to making mobile games, and mobile games make way more money than fighting games, right? So hopefully they will fork up a big enough budget to get at least 20 characters, because like I said, I think that would be a really good starting roster. And I am actually really confident in these predictions. I'm so confident, in fact, that I think the top 20 characters that I just said, the top 3 rows with Genthru and Razor being in, an either or situation, being a one or the other situation, plus Knuckle and Shoot. Let me just do this for the sake of clumping them together. The top 3 rows here, with there being a slash between Genthru and Razor, I'm so confident in that being the base roster, assuming it has around 20 characters, that I think I'm willing to bet this will be the roster plus or minus 3 characters. I'm going to give myself a 3 character margin of error. So 3 of the characters on my list, let's say the game comes out with 20 characters, but 3 of them are different from what I predicted, that would fall within my margin of error. I think it would be really close because, like I said, there are some characters in the show that are so much more easy to adapt into a fighting game than others, and some of the characters never even revealed their full nin abilities, and some characters never even fought at all, right? So knowing that, that is what my final placements are going to be. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you've made it this far, I'm assuming you are somebody that also really wants to talk about this sort of thing. So please let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you have any ideas for the characters that I didn't think of, or if you can think of any other reasons for why to maybe rearrange the order of likelihood here. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see all of you later, and bye for now.